Nothing But the Truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa from India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues of concern and bring you clarity and perspectives as to why these matter to you and the one clear truth that emerges. For over 2 decades now, India Today magazine brings out the biannual Mood of the Nation poll. It is now considered the barometer of political and social economic development across the country. We are just out with the August 2022 Mood of the Nation poll, and there are some very interesting findings. Top among them is that the NDA will continue to retain its majority if a poll is held now, though considerably reduced from what it had in 2019 Lok Sabha elections. In 2019, the NDA constituents won close to 352 seats. In our latest Mood of the Nation poll, the assessment is that the NDA will be around 307 seats. Of course, there is a variation because as we were doing the poll, the Bihar political changeover happened, and clearly that would impact a number of seats in the Lok Sabha because Bihar has 40 seats of them, and that could change the margins that were there. We did a snap poll and found that yes, there would be a decline of about 21 seats for the NDA, but they would still be clear of the majority mark of 272 in the Lok Sabha. And most importantly, for the BJP, it will be crossing a majority on its own. It had 283 before the Bihar episode happened, and now it's down to about 275, which means it's still above the 272 mark, and therefore they need not rely extremely on the allies to get themselves through, and that is big because nowhere, if you look at what is happening currently across the world, is political parties getting past all the problems that the world faces right now and winning elections. We saw that difficulty that's happening when President Emmanuel Macron went for re-election. We saw just how difficult it was for President Trump to be re-elected, and finally Joe Biden won. And yet, in contrast, what these polls show is that not only is the BJP going to come back to power in 2024 if the trend continues, but Mr. Modi's popularity, Mr. Narendra Modi's popularity, the Prime Minister of India, has gone up by 12% and stands at 66%. That's an enormous sort of lead that he has as compared to the others that's there. And in fact, if you looked at world leaders, he's probably one of the few world leaders who bucks the trend and has his ratings up. In fact, there is a US-based intelligence agency that does a weekly poll of 22 democratic countries, and Mr. Modi figures on the top with a rating of 74%. All other major leaders, whether it's Joe Biden in the US, whether it is Emmanuel Macron in France, the leadership in Japan, Australia, wherever you look at it, they are going down. But Mr. Modi holds, and in fact is among the highest rated at the moment. And most importantly, domestically too, he is on top. The Mood of the Nation poll that India Today does reaffirms that. And let's not forget, this comes at a time that you have multiple crises impacting not only India but across the world. You have the Ukraine war that is already now into its 4th or 5th month, and it's creating its own global economic problems. You have COVID, which doesn't seem to go. We've had the 3rd, 4th wave, and a lot of us are falling sick again. Then, in India itself, as a result of all these problems, you have inflation. All of us are complaining about rising prices, particularly of oil, our fuel prices, petrol and diesel. We all feel the pinch. And with it, the fact of lack of jobs. And the economy is certainly not recovered from the pandemic and the effects it has had. So here is this phenomenon. Mr. Modi and the NDA and the BJP are going to win if an election was held now, despite these serious problems. And the fact that Mr. Modi is so ahead of all his other rivals, as well as his personal popularity is up, is a phenomenon by itself. And yet, it is a paradox. How does he do it? Even as all these crises face, what is it that propels Mr. Modi to the top and the BJP despite these problems? In this episode, we'll get into some of those reasons. What is remarkable about Mr. Modi's lead that he has is that he is in his 9th year as Prime Minister. And if you looked at the past, Prime Ministers that were in their 9th year, normally there was a huge wobble. In fact, they were beginning to crumble. Let's take a look at Dr. Manmohan Singh, who preceded Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In his 9th year as Prime Minister, in 2013, he faced major economic problems. And with it were scams and corruption that besetted his government. The result was when India Today magazine did the Mood of the Nation poll in 2013, the UPA 2, the figure showed that they would lose the elections if it was held then. And as a matter of fact, by 2014, they did lose the elections. Then if you go a little further back into time, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, one of the most popular Prime Ministers of India, wins 1971 elections with a landslide. But as she heads towards her 9th year as Prime Minister, the nation has major problems. There is an oil shock that happens that raises petrol and diesel prices, and with it, there is joblessness and also price rise. These factors then force her, because there's massive protests across the nation, to declare emergency by 1975, and that was a dark chapter in India's democratic history. So 2 prime ministers who've touched 9 years and the problems they faced. Mr. Modi is in his 9th year, but despite all the other issues, all the other factors that we talked about existing, he continues to be popular, and the chances of the NDA government winning seems imminent. So there is this paradox. And if you look at some of the other answers, maybe you will get to understand why this is happening. We also asked in this Mood of the Nation poll, what are the biggest achievements of Prime Minister Modi's government? Top among the list was curbing or controlling COVID. Now this is remarkable because just a year and a half back when we did the Mood of the Nation poll, he did terribly because at that particular time, the second wave had devastated all of us and people were disillusioned. This is a remarkable turnaround for the Prime Minister to have COVID listed as one of his top achievements. And that he does by introducing this massive vaccination program that we've all taken. I've got my second one, now going for my 3rd shot, and so has everybody else. And that has enabled us to handle the subsequent waves with less health damage and much more ease and loss. And there's not that much loss of productivity as we saw in the first and the second wave. The other issues that he does well, which has been listed, are abrogation of Article 370, the building of the Ram Temple, and also curbing corruption and as well as demonetization, cutting down on black money, though that has always been a controversial subject. Now, when you look at his failures, when we ask the respondents, and we do over 120,000 respondents across all major states, and we have a tracking system to ensure that that is there, and we collaborate with Seawater, a very reputed poll agency, that comes out with these numbers. And when they looked at the failures, number 1 on the failure was price rise, followed by unemployment. And if you looked at the third thing was economic growth. So 3 major factors, all pertaining to the economy. So what is it that makes Mr. Modi, despite the fact that economy is such an important thing, not get impacted by these adverse numbers? If you talk to pollsters, there are 4 of 5, or let's say 4 really, major demographic fundamentals that are there that determine the outcome of a political election. And what are these issues that are there? 1 is corruption, 2 is inflation, 3 is joblessness, and 4th is national security or insecurity. Now, these play a major role in the way we would vote a government in. Now, if you look at the first 2 things, whether it is jobs and price rise, both of these are negatives for the Modi government as well as the NDA. What is it that makes it positive? Their corruption. If you looked at 2013, Mr. Manmohan Singh or Dr. Manmohan Singh is down because of the scams. Mr. Modi, after 9 years, is almost scam-free. there are no major charges of corruption against them. And this clean government has had a big impact in terms of the fact that people trust Mr. Modi. Whatever the problems that are there, whether it's price rise, whether it is joblessness, they believe that he could do the job. And as he demonstrated on another national security issue, which I talked about earlier, on COVID management, despite the setbacks, he comes out and makes sure that the nation feels safe. So on the national security issue and on the entire perception that we have in terms of the way he has run the government, right? The sincerity with which he runs it, the kind of force that he puts into delivering and putting his shoulder to the wheel, giving the feeling that the nation is secure when he is at the head of it, whatever the crisis is there. And that is one of the major explanations that we find that is the reason for his current popularity rates increasing at the time of the most difficult situations that they face. The other big issue is that there is a complete lack of opposition. The opposition is in complete disarray, and this is a problem. Because if you had an opposition that was strong, all these issues, prices, brings down governments in the past, joblessness, that should have people on the streets. Yet, the opposition is not able to cash in on that. And one of the major reasons is that the Congress party, which is the prime opposition party, continues to be in disarray. There is infighting going on among the leadership. They have to sort out. They're not very clear. When we asked our respondents who should lead the party, while a lot of people said that Rahul Gandhi should continue to be or should be the future leader, there was ambiguity. They even talked of Dr. Manmohan Singh as a popular leader that needs to come back. Now, when you asked whether the Gandhis, whether it was Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, or Priyanka Gandhi should head the Congress, a majority of them said they shouldn't be there, that there should be an alternate leadership. And so there is a paradox in that they need to sort out. The problem also lies in the fact that Rahul Gandhi has not taken full control of leadership, and that is a perception problem. On the other hand, when we asked a question as to who would be the best to head an opposition coalition, it was not Rahul Gandhi that came on top. It was Arvind Kejriwal, followed by Mamata Banerjee, and then followed by Rahul Gandhi. So the perception is that Rahul Gandhi is not yet been a leader for a long time, but not yet in a position to knit a coalition together and bring it there. And Kejriwal is the rising star. He has, in fact, made major inroads into Punjab, where he won a landslide. He is now contesting Gujarat, and he won re-elections in Delhi. So he has a middle-class connect and a popularity that is growing. His problem is, while he shows leadership qualities, he does not have an organization. And while it's the opposite, when you come to the Congress has an organization. It has a pan-India presence that the Aam Aadmi Party, which Kejriwal heads, does not have at all. And yet, you see that the Congress might have the organization, but it doesn't have the leadership to pull it off. So in some senses, the BJP, barring regional leaders like Mamata Banerjee, where you cannot challenge her in her own bastion, which is West Bengal, she demonstrated that she could win hands down, despite the kind of artillery that BJP brought into that. You have other leaders like Naveen Patnaik, who's standing strong, and in fact is voted among the best chief ministers or the number one chief minister in his home state in this particular poll. And you have other regional leaders down in the south, where there's Stalin in Tamil Nadu, KCR, K. Chandrasekhar Rao in Telangana, and Jagan Reddy in Andhra. Not to forget Pinarayi Vijayan in Kerala. So these regional leaders by themselves are strong, but they are not able to put together an opposition that could challenge the NDA and the Modi government. And if you look at why Mr. Modi continues to be popular, is because he has this CEO approach towards governance. He makes sure that he is able to deliver, and the regional leaders who are also very popular have that same approach, whether it is Arvind Kejriwal, Mamata Banerjee, Naveen Patnaik, they deliver. They have governance, and that's what makes the difference. Now, Mr. Modi combines this with 3 or 4 other factors. And that is one of the reasons that propels him to the forefront. And this is and if you look at the achievements that is there, is that his party's espousing of the Hindutva, Mr. Modi has propagated that more than any other BJP leader in the past. And he's done that in his second term very rapidly. Two major issues. One was the abrogation of Article 370, which the BJP said it would always do. It did that very early in its second term. The second was the rebuilding of the Ram temple, which is under great progress at the moment and should be completed before 2024 elections are on. So on these two major factors that the BJP's plank was, or the RSS plank, the mentor of the BJP, Mr. Modi has ticked them, and that is he's delivered. The other aspect he's done is he has appropriated the left plank of socialism and has established a huge amount of welfare schemes. We have all felt the impact of that, whether it is in delivering pipe water supply to houses, building toilets, we saw the Swachh Bharat mission, whether it was in terms of building houses, roads, cooking gas, free cooking gas, and cylinders to everybody. Mr. Modi has this huge amount of welfare schemes, the Labharathis as they called, and this has become a major propellant in terms of the vote. So he's balancing out, one, the Hindutva vote, with a huge dose of welfarism, which the Congress and other left parties in the past used to be their plank. He has taken that plank, made it the BJP's plank. And the third aspect of it is the hyper-nationalism that he brings to the table. And that is demonstrated in the way he deals with Pakistan. You saw the Pulwama incident, saw him go to Balakot, deep into Pakistan territory and carry out attacks. The Uri massacres was retaliated with, and with China, a very, very firm stand on the border. In that, he projects a position of being a strong leader who is in control of affairs and willing to take the extreme step to protect the nation. And that is what is propelling him to the forefront, as I was mentioning earlier. Now, of course, while all this looks very good for the India, it is quite vulnerable, as we saw in Bihar. What happened in Bihar is, all of us know that Nitish Kumar ditched BJP coalition and joined with the RJD, Tejasvi, and they have formed the government over there, and Bihar has 40 seats, and the impact is already being felt with that. So, as someone said, if you now travel from Kanyakumari, you can go to Kathmandu without touching a BJP state. So if you go, you start off from Tamil Nadu, you get into Kerala, not ruled by them. Tamil Nadu also not ruled by them. You can get to Andhra or Telangana, not ruled by them. You can go to Odisha. From there you come to Bihar, Jharkhand, even if you want to touch West Bengal and come down and go up to Kathmandu. None of these are BJP states. So the BJP is vulnerable in these flanks. Where it's really winning in these states or holding on is that our polls show that in Uttar Pradesh, they will get close to 70 out of the 80 seats. They are sweeping Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh. These were all Congress bastions, as well as likely to win in Gujarat substantially. I'm talking of the Lok Sabha elections. We are not talking of the state elections at all. So wherever there is a direct fight with the Congress, the BJP is getting the upper hand, and that is what is bringing them to the number of 283. But that also makes them vulnerable on all these fronts, because if any of these other states go, Maharashtra for instance, though they have now captured power with a rebel faction of the Shiv Sena, the current polls show that there is going to be a balance in the total number of seats over there. Maharashtra is a huge state, contributes close to, has 48 Lok Sabha seats, and a great determinant of the outcome of an election. And there also, there is still the balancing act that is going on. And so, if the BJP party and its leadership must clearly be worried, while they may be comforted by these findings, they need to look at these facts to determine what they need to do to establish it. What hasn't helped them is that they are perceived to be doing things, including poaching, as we saw that happen in Maharashtra, to collaborate and bring down governments with rebel groups that are there. Whether it happened in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and Goa, this was a party that claimed it was being different, but in recent years, they have gone what we call the old Congress way, where you were poaching, creating defections to get power at any cost, and that is not a good impression for a national party that was seen all this while as a party with a difference, and as I'd said earlier, absolutely corruption-free at the central government level, no major scams. And the other issue that has been an increasing public debate is the use of the Enforcement Directorate to get at political rivals. Many people see it as motivated. The BJP says no, that's all these people are corrupt and they need to be caught. When we asked our surveyors, those who were being surveyed, as to what they thought of it, they generally felt that the BJP was not, there was close to 40% said the BJP is not to blame on the front of this thing. They think it's fine, whatever's happening in terms of defections in these various states. And secondly, on the ED, the use of the ED, they feel that the BJP government has done nothing extraordinary. Previous governments have done it. So there is comfort in the fact that the BJP is not getting stones thrown at them as a result of this. But there is a caveat in that. When you looked at those who said it's okay for them to do that versus those who disapproved of it, the gap was very close. So the perception management of that is something that the BJP would have to think about. The other issue that this entire opinion poll throws about is who after Mr. Modi. Firstly, we asked who is the best suited to be the next Prime Minister. Mr. Modi wins, hands down. He is 53%, and the gap between him and Rahul Gandhi and Arvind Kejriwal is over 40%. And which means that they are in single digits when it comes to popularity, whereas Mr. Modi, the conviction that Mr. Modi is best for the country is at its height at the moment. When we asked who would be the leader that could succeed Mr. Modi if he for some reason he doesn't want to contest, then 2 or 3 names came up. And among them was Amit Shah, who led the pack, followed by Yogi Adityanath and Nitin Gadkari. In fact, when we asked who were the best ministers in the central government, Nitin Gadkari came on top, as did Amit Shah and Rajnath, and these are the second line of leadership that is there. Of course, interestingly, there is a close contest, if you might call it, though these are just polls, so we must understand these are numbers that people perception rating between Mr. Amit Shah and Ms. Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh. But if you look at it, Mr. Amit Shah has far more advantages because he has national experience. He's a remarkable organizer. He has the BJP party with him. He is the one that led the BJP to 2 victories in 2014 and 2019. He's considered the architect of these victories along with Prime Minister Modi. And he has gained over a period of time a national perspective by joining government as well as running the party. So in many senses, Mr. Shah has the advantage. But Yogi Adityanath is the rising star for the BJP. He's won UP twice. That puts him into the front, also as a front runner in the race that's there. Where Mr. Adityanath has to work on, or the issues that he needs to work on, is one, he needs to have greater organization connect. The kind of connect Amit Shah has is something that he needs to look out for. Whether he's able to develop that over the next couple of years is to be seen. The second, of course, is he needs to have a model of government. The Yogi model of government, let's call it, because Mr. Modi came to power when he created in Gujarat the Modi model of governance. And that meant a clean government, an efficient government, willing to deliver and deal with people, and also a bold and brave government. Now, Yogi Adityanath, fair enough, he's earned his name in terms of being a bulldozer government, but he now has to show development. That is the key, because as we've seen, all people really want development. People want houses, people want jobs, people want prices to be down. They are not, yes, there will be an element of, other issues that come in, whether it is religious or other factors, patriotism. But at the end of the day, government is all about delivering these services and making your life better. And that is what even the NDA government, not only Yogi government there, has to focus on. The third aspect of any leader coming to the top, and let's look at Mr. Modi, is charisma and connective. There's no one better than Prime Minister Modi at the moment in his ability to connect with the common man, to directly speak to them and assure them that he could deliver. Plus, he's spellbound in his oratory. When you listen to him, he has that presence that all the other BJP leaders will find it difficult to do. It is not that they don't have charisma, they don't have the kind of charisma that Modi has, and therefore, the second line of leadership that is there, because Mr. Modi is now in his second term, likely to go into his third term, But it is important that he develops a second line of leadership to take after him and carry out his vision that is there. And this is the jockeying that is going around that we see in this thing. Now, finally, when you look at what are the steps ahead, clearly what does the poll show? One, that people believe that Mr. Modi is still the best bet to solve the country's problems. Two, they also are concerned and deeply concerned by the fact the economic side of this, of running the government has not been as good. There are, for various reasons, and fortunately for Mr. Modi, the Ukraine war and the COVID pandemic gives his government not an excuse, but one of the reasons to say we are not to blame. And people understand that there is a major black swan event like COVID that has brought all the problems that we have, as well as Ukraine. But the fact is, at the end of it, people are saying you're now in charge. So in the next 2 years, it is very, very important that Mr. Modi and his government focus on the economy. Maybe one of the ways to do it is to look at some of the key issues that are there and create high-powered groups to sort them out, so that there is an element that you feel that things are being done urgently. So if it is jobs, okay, get a whole group together to say we're sorting out. Prices, what do we do? COVID management, they did very well when they brought all the ministries together, and we saw how that was like a complete force multiplier effect that sorted out a lot of these problems. You need to do that for the Ukraine war. What is our stand over there? What will we do? How much is global recession going to happen? Exports, what do we do? How do we do the cash in on the fact that China is being pushed aside, and should we become a major player in the export market? Each of these require a tremendous amount of things. Our house is on fire, let's not forget it. The economy is still not returned to the pandemic level, and it is very important that the Modi government focuses directly in the next 2 years, because people believe in Mr. Modi. People believe that he could deliver. And it's very, very important that they don't resort or fall into the temptation that if the economy begins to slide, you start the other front, which is Hindutva and polarization. That is not something that the country requires at the moment. Right now, hard focus, get to the economy, and very important, people betting on Mr. Modi, he should not fail us. For more details of this, the entire poll, look at the latest issue of India Today. It has all the charts, all the graphs that I talked about, worth looking at. And thank you for listening to this episode, and look forward to having you with me next time. Nothing but the truth.